I'm about to pull up. His wasteful kindness. And I've been waiting so long. Now I gotta resurface. Hey, we about to talk stop. All that bread and we burn it. Cause I've been feeling cool talk. I've been fucking cool talk. We're turning up.
Welcome to Mitten State Sports Corner. This is going to be our third episode. I am Brett with 1T.
Welcome back. I'm Brett with 2 T's. On today's docket, we are talking college football, a little Michigan football, and the long-awaited return of college football 25 to the video game universe.
So, super excited to see about that.
Oh, yeah. I was a very, very big advocate for college football video games growing up. Loved all of those games. Always did. Road to Heisman created my own player. Obviously a lot better than I personally am. And win Heisman all 4 years, but who doesn't do that?
You know, it really stunk when you used to be able to play the game and they didn't have their names on it because there was so many, copyright laws and, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I guess I'm not even sure what they would call them now, but there was so many issues with that. And so it was just always kind of weird to have number 99 ran the ball in, right? Like it was never, it was never the actual player's name. So it's good to see it, more lifelike. And, it looks like they've really spent a lot of attention to detail on, trying to make it as realistic as possible, especially with like the walkout music and, the environments and stuff like that. And they've even stated that the weather is going to take a really big toll in this game as well. So that'll be pretty awesome to see.
Well, and you look at it now, obviously it's a totally different college world with all the NIL stuff. So obviously you can use players' names now, and you can use a bunch of other things as regarding the university. So it's obviously a whole new world. So it's very exciting that this game has finally come back. I'm not big in the video game universe, but I definitely do want to dabble into it a little bit just out of nostalgia reasons. So, but we'll end on that one. I mean, we don't really have much to talk about, but it's pretty exciting starting tomorrow, July 15th.
Right.
Long way to return, 11 years. Denard Robinson was on the last cover. We got Will Johnson on this cover, so a double Michigan athlete on the cover, so that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're going to jump right into a little college football talk, and we'll talk about these new college football conference alignments. Mm-hmm. And a lot of shakeup coming this season, where Pac-12 is virtually nothing anymore, and then now Big Ten has added some teams, SEC's added some teams, ACC's added some teams, and so what do we think? So we'll just go into Big Ten because obviously we're Michigan fans, and we'll be watching a lot of Big Ten football.
Yep.
So in comes Oregon, USC, UCLA, and Washington for this upcoming 24-25 season. So those are some pretty big ads. Obviously, it makes it's a travel adjustment, obviously, when we have to go to some of those schools. But so now the Big Ten reads Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, Maryland, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Nebraska, Northwestern, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Purdue, Rutgers, UCLA, USC, Washington, and Wisconsin.
It's a lot of teams, and, obviously, teams like Oregon, and even USC in a lot of ways, typically high-flying offenses, especially USC, not a ton of defense, which, obviously, typically the Big Ten teams have decent defenses or good defenses and run games, which is not really what USC does typically, especially under Lincoln Riley. Under DeBoer, Washington, I would say did a little of both, but they were mostly an offensive team too, which obviously that's going to change this year with him going to Alabama. UCLA is kind of a crapshoot. I mean, typically, at least recently they've been kind of, around that average, middle of the road, maybe a couple wins over whatever. But really the biggest threat, I think, to Michigan football is Oregon. There's no doubt about it. Oregon.
Not just Michigan football, I'd say the whole conference.
Without a doubt. And I think, I don't know if you guys have seen or heard this, but Phil Knight, owner of Nike.
Unlimited NIL.
Unlimited NIL. So these players, literally, whatever they're asking for, he's willing to pay it. Obviously within the rules, which obviously we know those are pretty loose. They're basically willing to pay whatever it takes to bring a championship home. And I can say this, Oregon's going to be a formidable foe, but in the past, it has never worked out in pro sports for guys to buy teams. It just doesn't. You can get to the playoffs, you can maybe get to the conference finals in basketball, or you could get to the college football playoff, but they just don't win it typically, right? And so I'm hoping that situation where Michigan, I don't expect them to go undefeated. I do expect them to lose a couple games. Maybe that's one of them. I don't know. But I'm hoping that they can hang around enough to get into the playoffs, and then that's when I think the Big Ten football is going to show up. And I think Big Ten football typically is very well set up for the college football playoff because you need defense and teams like in the SEC, right? They play a lot of offense, right, too. But they also have a couple of defensive teams. Georgia typically has always been really good on defense. Washington as well, or I'm sorry, Alabama as well. And so they, typically have always played decent defense too, and that's what wins championships, right? And those guys have won a lot recently. So I think that'll help bode well. But yeah, definitely interesting. I mean, all these teams are on the west side of the country. Obviously logistics changed completely, going from mostly a Midwestern, Eastern conference to a country conference. Ohio State should be shaking in their boots. Ohio State has had to worry about Michigan lately. Now they also have to worry about Oregon.
And Oregon beat them a couple years ago.
Oregon's
went
beat
into
them
the horseshoe and beat them.
Yes.
So let's not forget that. But yeah, bringing Oregon in, obviously, I think is a real nice boost to the Big Ten. Bolsters their credibility a little bit, obviously, that the SEC claims to have. So adding USC and Oregon is definitely a good addition as far as trying to bolster that conference up.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so if you really think about it, with the addition of Oregon, we're going to have two Big Ten teams in the preseason top 5 because Ohio State and Oregon are definitely going to be there. They might even be number 1.
Michigan's 12 right now as it sits, which I don't think is an unrealistic spot for them just because there's a lot of unknowns, right? Quarterback, coaching, a lot of turnovers, replacing the entire offensive line. I don't expect them to give them number 1 seed, even though, or number 1, preseason ranking, but it's interesting, right? I mean, like you said, there could be 4 or 5 easy teams right here in the top 25 out of the gate, which is awesome for the conference.
They might even have 4 of the top 15.
Right.
Because obviously with Penn State, Oregon, Michigan, and Ohio State, they'll definitely be top 15.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously, as it pains me to say, Ohio State and Oregon are probably going to be battling for a preseason number 1.
Right.
It's just who has had the better offseason. I mean, it's a crapshoot at this point. They've both had great off seasons with the transfer portal, recruits, and all that such. So, if you could do a 1A, 1B on the rankings, I think it'd be those two.
Well, and obviously we're gonna be all of the home games this year for Michigan football. So we'll get a lot of chances to see these guys up close. We plan to be in the Pioneer parking lot. Excuse me. And honestly, it's something that we're gonna be at every week. Every home game, like I said, and we'll be able to kind of interact with everybody. And if you guys want to stop in and say hi, by all means, please do. We'd really love to see you. Come come stop in and check out what we're doing. We'll be there early. I mean, we're going to be there, for the noon games, we're going to be there at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. For the night games, we're going to be there at, 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And so we're going to be there all day. So you guys got plenty of opportunity to come by, stop in, do a shout out, whatever you want to do. Any sort of interaction is fine. But yeah, we plan to have a lot of stuff going on. We got some giveaways. We'll have some merchandise. We'll have some raffles. We got some athletes coming by. Big Noon Saturday we'll be hopefully trying to interact with too if we can. So there's a lot going on there. But we just, we're just really excited to see how this all kind of shakes out here. I'm really excited, honestly. One of my most exciting moments I'm ready for this season is the stripe out game against USC. It's the first time the Michigan Stadium's ever done it. I think that adds another layer, to the whole home field advantage. I mean, if you realize, Beaver Stadium for Penn State, they do those whiteout games. The color coordination with the crowd, and the atmosphere really adds another element to that. And so I'm really happy to see that Michigan's finally starting to take those steps. The only thing I really wish they would do a little more is make these night games a little bigger games. Playing UNLV or Eastern Carolina or whatever it is. I mean, night games is fine and dandy, but playing Oregon at night's another ball game. Playing Ohio State at nighttime, playing all these other bigger teams, Penn State, really adds another element to that and really just ups the stakes, right? Which is what you play these games for as an athlete coming into a school in the Big Ten. A lot of these guys are committing not even necessarily for the school that they're going to. I don't know if you realize more players commit to the schedule sometimes than anything else. And it's interesting because if you notice some of these guys that'll commit to, an Indiana, a Nebraska, it's not about maybe they go out and get paid big time, right, from these schools, right, and they know they're going to be the star player. But they also know, okay, I'm playing at Michigan Stadium probably a couple times.
Mhm.
I'm playing in the Horseshoe a couple times. Maybe I'll go to Oregon once or twice. I'm going to go out to USC. I mean, I get all this national attention, and I may be on, a 7-5 Nebraska team or something like. There's a lot of opportunity there, for you to get that attention. And as long as you play well, you've got a good shot. And so
Mhm.
it's something to really be considered. But yeah, it's really really going to be an interesting time to see what these teams do.
All right, let's jump into another conference that added some teams. Let's see the Big 12. Obviously, they lost Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC. We'll get to the SEC in a second. But Big 12 adds some more Pac-12 teams with Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah. So the Deion Sanders train is heading to the Big 12. Obviously, looks if you want to look at probably the top dogs of that conference, I really don't know.
It's hard to say. I mean,
Oklahoma State,
Colorado could do some damage depending on how
eh.
Dion does, but I'm not a big fan. Utah, I think, will still be up there.
Utah is always a good team. Oklahoma State's generally usually a good team
Right.
too. So, and then
Baylor,
Arizona State. I mean, in any given year they've been okay. So
Baylor could sneak in there too.
Baylor's had some down years, but they've obviously had some really good years too. And then West Virginia is always a little sneaky good team. UCF has had some good seasons. Texas Tech is the air raid offense still probably.
Yep.
And then we'll jump down to the Pac-2. Obviously, just leaves Oregon State, Washington State, where now they're pretty much doing what Notre Dame does with the ACC, where they play majority of the ACC schools, but they're going to be playing Mountain West schools. Obviously, it says Oregon State will play 7 games against Mountain West, and Washington State will play 8.
Mm-hmm.
Then we'll jump down to another conference. Obviously, that
Power
had 2 big additions. Obviously, Texas, Oklahoma, as previously mentioned, have left the Big 12, went into the SEC, and now you got the honestly SEC juggernaut of Alabama, Arkansas, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, LSU, big names there. And then you add in Tennessee, you have Texas, you have Oklahoma, Texas A&M. That is just, I mean, obviously we are Big Ten biased, but you can't, on paper, that's top dog.
Yeah.
That's top dog. You got Texas will be preseason top 5. Alabama's always preseason top 5. Georgia's another probably number 1 team.
Mm-hmm.
So it's obviously
it's a gauntlet, really. I mean, if you're a team like Ole Miss,
yeah.
I mean, who you do got that you think I've got a chance against? I mean, are you gonna beat Alabama consistently, Georgia consistently, Oklahoma, Texas? I mean, right? Like, how many breaks in the schedule do you get? I mean, it's an absolute gauntlet.
The SEC is definitely top dog conference of the college football, and Big Ten's not far behind, but SEC definitely still they have the more blue bloods, and so yeah, SEC obviously we have Texas. Michigan does play Texas this year, and I think they also play Oklahoma in years to come as well. I'm pretty sure. I think they have a home and home with them in the future as well. So, and then obviously just beat Alabama last year. So we'll see what the Big Ten could do against the SEC. Obviously, we usually don't ever see it until about the college football playoff, which is also expanded to 12 teams this year from the previous 4. So a lot of changes coming to college football this year.
Mm-hmm.
Even the ACC added a couple teams, which kind of surprised me. They SMU, which is kind of was a little off the wall addition. I didn't even know they were leaving. I think they were in the CUSA. I think is where they were at, and then they added 2 Pac-12 teams of Cal and Stanford. Good old Cal-Stanford game from I think the 70s or 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Stanford's had some lowly years. Cal has always just been kind of middle of the road team. But so those are your new notable conference realignments this coming year. Obviously, SEC and Big Ten with the bigger additions. So we'll see what happens with this coming year. Obviously, Michigan got a nice tough schedule. They have an SEC team in Texas, and they have Oregon, USC, and Washington on the schedule this year. So we'll see what happens. It's gonna be a good year.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see where the season goes for Michigan football. I mean, I think they've got a chance to to do some damage, right, and kind of prove the critics wrong. I will say though, it's not going to be easy. I mean, like you said, playing Texas game 2, that's a tough game right out of the gate. And Texas loaded. I mean, they're loaded and ready to go, and they kind of feel like they got snubbed last year, and should have been there, and maybe they should have been, right, whatever the case may be, but they didn't make it, and so um, now they're going to come back with some inventions, and I think Michigan's being severely overlooked. I really do. I think they're being discredited for what they've lost and not what they still have, and you got to think. I mean, the guys that are now starters per se now for this season were third string and backups last year. I mean, how incredible is it that Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham were not necessarily always starters last year, or Will Johnson was a starter, right? I mean, again, these guys played a lot of minutes, but I mean, if you think about who'd they have in front of them, Chris Jenkins was in front of them, right? Like you had Mozzie Smith the year before. I mean, these guys were backups, and they're dominant. They're absolutely dominant. And Kenneth Grant, mind you, was a 3-star recruit, and severely overlooked by most programs in the country. I mean, there was some offers out there, but it just goes to show that we don't need the 5-star guys that some of these other teams need to get the headlines. It's about how you develop, and I think that Michigan does it better than anybody. And so I'm really excited to see how they do, with the new schedule and some of these new ads for their teams and stuff, and kind of see what they can do to stack up against the rest of them. Because I'll tell you what, they can sneak through Texas and start getting to that meat of their schedule. You start walking into those games 5 or 6-0, and all of a sudden, I think the tune really changes on the season, and I think that they'll start to believe. Not that they don't now, right? But they're going to really start to believe what they can do. And like you said, if you do a 12-team playoff, they can
sneak in.
They can sneak in with a loss or two because they're in a power conference.
If they beat Texas game 2, I think that really does set up the year for success, because then obviously they'll give them a nice confidence boost, because obviously people are doubting them a little bit because they did lose a lot on both sides of the ball.
Yep.
But if they do go out and beat Texas, who will be preseason top 5, it'll be a very, very good statement win to start the year. They'll take them. I think it takes them right pretty much into Big Ten play at that point because of what the extended schedule.
Right.
So it'll be a nice, good stepping stone for him. I mean, and Sharon Moore has proven that he can win some big games already. So he went into Penn State and won Penn State. He went in beat Ohio State. So we'll see. I have good feelings. I'm with you where I feel like they are overlooked but the one thing Michigan's had for years is depth. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those depth players are now going to have their chance this year to do something. And right. you saw last year, Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham, where they weren't really talked about, and then they came out and they had breakout games,
mm-hmm.
and now everyone's talking about them.
And they broke out in the biggest games. I mean, how about Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham in the national championship game? They took Penix down several times, and that's
Alabama.
Something,
they had a really good game,
and they had I mean, obviously they amongst others, Derek Moore had a really solid game there too, and he's another guy too that I'm really, really excited about. He was a big time recruit, top 50 if I remember right. He's a junior now, I believe. And I mean, we got a really big chance here. We got some really solid players. There was a couple of them that left that I was not really expecting to, like Braden McGregor. Didn't really expect him to leave. Mm-hmm. So obviously they may have lost a little more than they thought, but they also got some guys back. Quentin Johnson came back on the back end. That was kind of big. I mean, obviously losing Rod Moore stinks a lot. That is what it is, right? I mean, it's just kind of the nature of the beast sometimes, but Makari Page.
Did he age out or?
No, yeah, he's ACL.
Oh, he tore his ACL? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, that sucks.
Makari Page, he's back. That was a huge, huge, huge deal. So, I mean, they have a really solid secondary. I really think that they're gonna do a lot of damage this year.
I'd say best case scenario, obviously they run the table, but I mean, obviously Texas, Oregon, Ohio State, obviously those 3 games right there are very pivotal. Where they could lose all 3 of them, they could win all 3 of them, they could split them or what. But I think the rest of the schedule they should take care of business. It's just those 3 games right there that I do question. Mm-hmm. And obviously, even if they do lose all 3 of those games, but if they keep them close games, they don't get blown out or anything like that. I mean, the case still could be made for a top 12 playoff. Because
I don't know. I think they got to win at least one of them.
So you think about it. If they lose all 3 of those games, and those are only 3 games they lose, and they lose in close battles, and those 3 teams are in the top 6 in the playoff,
right?
I mean, that's a good resume. albeit like obviously you don't want those losses, but if you
Well,
were to
no,
have losses on your
no,
schedule, those are the ones you do want.
for sure. Yeah, I'd rather lose to a team like that. And yeah, same thing. I mean, even if they were to go out and get 2 losses on the year, but you lose early to Texas, maybe you come back and beat Oregon, let's say in the middle of the season, maybe you lose to Ohio State in a close one. Yeah, I mean, you're right there. I mean, you talk about that early loss. A lot of times you get chalked up to teams figuring their way, and like I said, you keep that close. You beat a good Oregon team that's top 5. And yeah, you're definitely in the conversation. That's kind of what I mean. I think they can at least get away with 2 losses as long as they're close and not blowouts
Correct.
to get in. 3 might be pushing it for me personally. I mean, I don't see how they let a 3-loss team in the playoff, to be honest with you. I mean, I just think there's going to be too many other teams out there that are going to make a better case, good, bad, or indifferent, whether we agree with it or not. But yeah, I'm really excited to see what happens here. And like I said, it's going to be a huge part being at them every night and every day. And it's really just going to be a really awesome upcoming season.
Well, you say something about like don't know about if you can allow 3 loss teams in there, but you look at it with all these new realignments. Is obviously Oklahoma and Texas, they play in the SEC now.
Right.
They very well could have 2 or 3 losses.
Right.
So you look at all these teams that are generally in it every year, they're playing different schedules now. So maybe the 2-3 loss teams, maybe that's why they expanded to 12 teams now, to where now, albeit you have 2-3 losses, but you lost to Alabama, you lost to Ohio State, you lost to Oregon, you lost to the top teams, and so your resume is still good. I mean, you look at college basketball does the same way, where they do like when you think about the bracket, they had the key wins, key losses, and such. So it's going to be a totally different year as far as how all that goes.
Mm-hmm. I think one thing that I will say about the I guess the college football playoff selection process is it's very similar, but it's very different year to year. It depends on who's on the committee, and it seems like the I don't want to say the rules or the stipulations, but maybe the weight of some of these situations seems to change. So depending on how that shakes out too, like you said, yeah, I mean, you might be able to get a favorable decision. But I think that, at the end of the day, having better competition is only going to make them better. And I really think that, if Oregon goes out and goes crazy like they did this year, Ohio State goes crazy like they did this year, and then they don't win it, I do believe that Ohio State fires Ryan Day this year if he doesn't win the Michigan game.
Yeah.
I really do. I mean, and that's something that I'm not here to say they couldn't hire somebody and be very, very, very relevant next year, but there's some level of step back, right? I mean, just like Michigan, they're going to have some level of step back and may not be a big one, but you got some adjustment there. And so maybe that's going to be a decent window for us to keep it going. But, Michigan, if you remember, they have not recruited the best classes in the last couple of seasons. But, they're still top 15, top 20, which, that's still a lot of talent. That's still a lot of stars. That's still a lot of good players. And again, they develop better than anybody. And so they're going to be relevant either way. But I would really love to see this, see what Coach Moore does different. I'm really excited to see what he keeps the same. And it appears, at least from what I can tell, the culture has not changed one bit.
No. He's definitely keeping. And I don't think you see much difference as far as how the game is, how Michigan football game is played either, as far as plays, schemes, and all that. I don't see there will be much difference at all. So obviously, because I know he was probably limited of what he could do as when he was acting head coach, but I think his philosophy is pretty much the same way. He preaches smash football, and obviously that was Harbaugh's way too. So,
right.
Well, I do want to get a personal shout out. Let's shout out Jim Harbaugh for all he did for Michigan.
Yep, absolutely.
Because that was a home run hire back in 2015, much needed after the Rich Rod and Brady Hoke eras. Even though Brady Hoke started well, he ended bad.
Mm-hmm.
But Harbaugh came in, obviously, and he said on his opening press conference it was to bring a national championship to Michigan, and that's what he did. And I always thought if Harbaugh was to go out, he was definitely going to go out on top. And with how the last couple of years went, like you definitely saw it trending in that direction, and obviously he did get there. So obviously good for Harbaugh, and it was a good time for him, I would say, to make the jump back to the NFL. So all good luck to him, Chargers head coach. Obviously, he picked up quite a few Michigan players in the draft, which is obviously very cool.
But the biggest thing that I remember hearing a lot of in the beginning was that, a lot right when Harbaugh left, a lot of these players knew Harbaugh was leaving at the beginning of the national championship season. And that's something that I did not know. I really assumed that it was very close to the vest. But Harbaugh was such an honest guy, and is at least from what I can tell, I've never personally spoken to him. But it appears that he's a very, forthright and honest guy, and so I can't say that I'm that surprised, but I think that it's really interesting to see that they went out and accomplished that goal, knowing their head coach was leaving at the end of the season, right? And some of these guys knew darn well they were coming back. They have to, um, and for it to just be business as usual, and this transition to Sharon Moore and all this, I mean, it's just really awesome. I mean, I think that, like you said, him coming to Michigan and kind of bringing back that relevancy and the old days of Michigan football, and line play is a strong play. I really think that's been really a nice pleasant sight to see, because when Rich Rod tried to spread Michigan's offense out,
Oh
I mean, it's the worst
boy.
decision in the world. Like we said, it's not Big Ten football. It's never been Michigan football, and it was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster. And he said, you know what? That's not what we're good at. We play to your strengths. We're going to run the ball. We're going to wind the clock down. We're going to have solid line play. We're going to get after the quarterback, and everything else will fall in line. And it sure did. Finally, as he kind of came around there.
I think it was Joel Klatt that said Michigan football is like a boa constrictor, where they just suffocate you.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, yeah, with the line play, the run play, like they do it slowly but surely.
Right.
Slowly but surely. That's why you never saw them like truly blow. Like there was a lot of games where they could have blown teams out. They could have scored 60, 70 points, but they just didn't. But that's just how their football is. But to also add to your point of when you saying like you felt like it was Harbaugh's last year and all that such, but you look at the roster, obviously it was good. It was Corum's last year, it was Sandra Still's last year, and it was a couple other guys last year. It's like they were going to go out with a bang, and you saw with how they played every day. So I think it was Harbaugh's last year, but at the same time, all those guys had the personal of like, this is my last year, like, and what they've been building for the last couple of years. It was like they're like, we're not going down without a fight,
Mm-hmm.
type situation. So, and obviously, it was hard. It would have been hard to see any of them leave after that TCU debacle.
But yeah, that'd be pretty tough to leave that as your last college moment, right?
And
I mean,
I think
tough to live with.
I think if they win that TCU game and then go into the national championship against Georgia, however that may have finished, I don't think Corum would have came back. I think a couple of guys would have left at that point.
And I don't think they win the Natty either.
No,
I got to tell you, I think
Yeah,
that's a
that's
tougher opponent. I'm not saying it's anything against Washington, but that's probably the best draw they could have gotten in the national championship game, because I would not have wanted to play Texas.
of the years that they were in the playoff, yeah. Because who in 21 obviously lost to Georgia in the semifinal,
Georgia
and
won
then
it
Georgia was it Georgia Alabama in the first?
Yeah, I believe so.
Was it
so.
Georgia Alabama? I don't remember. But then obviously if they would have beat TCU, they would have played that Georgia juggernaut.
Right.
So, and then obviously this year, I don't know. Do you think Alabama was better than that Florida State team?
Yes. Yeah, and here's why.
I think so too.
I think that Florida State, they played some games, right? I mean, they had a couple of teams on their schedule. They didn't really play a ton, but I think Alabama is just more built for the situation, and I think the committee knew that. Florida State was a good story. Obviously, not losing, that was kind of tough to leave them out. I mean, that's one of those things as a coach that you would preach, like, hey, you go out and handle your business, and the rest will take care of itself, and it did not.
Yeah.
It did not. And as Norville said, I mean, there's not a worse feeling in the world, than going out and handling your business and it's still not working out. And I tend to agree with them, in that sense that, I mean, what more do you want from me? I mean, I won every game on my schedule, but at the same time, I mean, they got absolutely mollywopped in their bowl game, and again, they had some guys that opted out. Jordan Travis, is that his name?
Something
Who's
like
the quarterback
that.
for Florida State?
So it was something like that. I know Hunter. I know
So
the guy
Hunter?
you said he's on Colorado for
Is he?
sure.
Okay. Yeah. So whatever. Just Travis
But
something.
I knew what you were saying.
Yeah, and he got hurt there. I want to say it was like the last game of the season.
It was Jordan Travis.
Jordan Travis. Okay. So Jordan Travis, pardon me. Yeah, he got hurt. Like I want to say it was one of the last games of the season.
Yeah, it was towards the end.
Towards the end there, and that really, I think more than anything, I think that really, took them into consideration. They're not the same team without him, and so I think that played a huge part.
Oh, that definitely played a huge role. Definitely. There's no other way to describe it. Like, how else would you, a power conference like the ACC, conference champion, undefeated, how would they not get in?
Right.
It's that was definitely, I would say, definitely the deciding factor.
Well, I think if he stays healthy, I think that result could change. I really do, and I think that they have to look at that a lot differently, right? I mean, they're fully healthy, but that's the decision they made, and it seemed to work out pretty good for our team. So I'm not going to complain too much.
True. Very true. That Alabama Rose Bowl game was very fun to watch. It
Still
was very
gives me
stressful.
chills. Still
Very
gives me
stressful,
chills.
but very fun game to watch.
Absolutely.
So I think we're going to wrap up a little bit today. I think you mentioned that you had a trivia question.
I do have a trivia question, actually, and this is actually not Michigan football related here. Actually, this is actually something Red Wings related here. But a buddy of mine sent me this video yesterday, and I thought you might be interested in hearing about it. And it says the roots of the Red Wings can be traced back to several cities. In 1926, the National Hockey League chose the Detroit Red Wings to be one of its expansion teams with the Western Hockey League, on the verge of acquiring players from the Victoria Cougars to help them form their roster. They even paid homage to originally naming themselves the Detroit Cougars, but they did not have a rink available to them. So where did they play their inaugural season that year?
Was it in Detroit?
No, it was not Detroit.
It was in Windsor.
It was in Windsor. Very nice.
Yeah, it was in Windsor.
To further that, what was the next stadium that they played at after it was in Windsor?
Now are we in Detroit?
Olympia. Yes.
Yeah. Then,
Yeah. So that, I mean, that's the kind of thing too. But interesting enough, if you think about it, a lot of people don't realize the chain of events that happened. To make the Detroit Red Wings, they got their name from a team in Montreal. That helped help name them as well. And I just think it's kind of interesting, to kind of see their roots and how they trace back to several cities, like you said, Victoria, Montreal, Windsor. They're all played a really big part in forming the Detroit Red Wings. And I just figured it'd be something interesting that didn't know if you knew.
To ask you a follow up, you may have the answer right in front of you, but
Absolutely.
do you know what the Red Wings' other name was too? So they were the Cougars, and then they were the Red Wings. There was another one though.
The Falcons.
You're reading it. I can see you.
I am reading it right
Cheater.
here. I don't care. It's
Cheater.
right here.
Cheater. Fine.
Answered the question.
Fine. I'll give you one then.
No, you just gave me
No,
one.
I'll
That's
give
what
you
just
one.
happened.
I'm going to give you a real one
Why
because
do
you're
you get
reading
two?
it. You're cheating. I'm going to give you a real one. I got you.
You have a laptop in front of you all day.
It's got 5 words on it.
So just Falcons is one word. I'm just saying. It sounds like I'm doing better.
All right, so I'll follow you up with another Red Wings question. So, let's see. Can you name who the Detroit played in the 2007 playoffs? So name their playoff runs. So obviously they lost in the Western Conference Finals. Can you name who they played in the round 1, round 2, and then who they lost to in the Western Conference Finals?
No, but I'm going to take a guess. But I'm going to tell you no right out of the gate.
Let's hear it.
Some version of Anaheim, Dallas.
They lost to Anaheim in the conference final.
Mm-hmm. They played Dallas in there. Nope, they didn't play Dallas in there.
Nope.
Colorado.
Nope.
Wow. Yep. So Anaheim's all I'm sticking with because I clearly have no idea.
They played Calgary round 1, I'm pretty sure. Beat them in 6. Then they played San Jose round 2.
That's a toughie. I never even thought of San Jose.
That was when San Jose started to make their turn with the Joe Thornton era.
Well, it's tough because they've been in the East for so long now that it's hard to remember what teams were in that division even, and how long it's been. I mean, it's crazy. It's been that long already.
Yep.
But, yeah, you got me on that one. But then again, what's new? I don't typically do well at trivia anyway. So.
All right, well, we're going to wrap up another episode here. So thank you all for tuning in. We want to take a moment. Words are hard. Take a moment. We'll include our sponsors here. So obviously we'll start with Crystal Fieldhouse, our home on Sunday nights for beer league hockey. Thank you for sponsoring us and believing in us. Thank you, Michelle, personally at Crystal Fieldhouse. She's been a huge help to us. So look for our banner on both rinks this coming fall.
Thank you to FiberLink out of Lapeer. Thanks, Tina, Chad, Joel, all of you guys. Thank you so much, and obviously many more too. Really appreciate everything. And again, thank you to M&M4 Properties, Marco, Marissa, Mercino. We owe you guys a beer. We really appreciate that, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for tuning in. You all have a great week.
dress bang.